Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie and today we're going to do a fun video where I recommend books to you. Many more people than previous years have asked for a recommendation, which was a little bit overwhelming, which is one of the reasons why this is a bit later than I wanted to, but it's okay. And basically I asked people to tell me their favourite colour, a book that they liked and read recently, and if they're looking for anything specific, and then I kind of try to like match a book rec through those things. A couple times I felt like I wanted to recommend the same book in response to different people, and I think maybe there is one book that I have done that with, but as a result of that I guess I would like encourage you to like treat all of these as like recommendations for you, maybe especially if like your favourite colour is the same as another person's favourite colour. But also, yeah, whatever. So the first recommendation is for Andrea, who asked for, who said purple as favourite colour, Idlewild by James Frankie Thomas, as a recent enjoyed book, and anything sapphic that's realistic fiction, or very low-key end of SFF. Non-fiction poetry, always welcome too. So, okay, I think that I'm going to recommend this book, Everything for Everyone, An Oral History of the New York Commune 2052 to 2072 by Emmy O'Brien and Eman Abdelhadi, because it's low-key end of SFF in the sense that it's set in the future and it's like, you know, quite sort of mundane and just like focused on people's like normal lives, but there obviously are like aspects of it that are like technologically, like scientifically elevated, so you know it's like a sci-fi fantasy in that sense, and it is also like in the format of non-fiction. So yeah, and obviously like it's queer in the sense that like, you know, people's whole relationships to each other is like transformed because of, you know, like the abolishment of global capitalism and the nation state. So yeah, I would recommend this. I also do feel like, again, this is kind of like a fake non-fiction book, which is actually not non-fiction, but does contain a lot of like actual factual stuff too, and that's After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz. This isn't like a wholesale recommendation because I wouldn't say like it's an incredible book, but I do think that it kind of does like maybe fit what you're looking for too, in the sense like it's sapphic and yeah, like it's a good read too, like it's interesting, and yeah. I really don't feel like either of these books are very purple though, so sorry about that. I do think a book that is purple, and this is the book that I kind of want to recommend to multiple people, so I might do that as we go along, but that's Sweet Days of Discipline by Fleur Jaeggy, translated by Tim Parks, unless you can read Italian, because this feels very purple. It also seems like it might have some overlaps with Idlewild in terms of its like focus on like sort of queer, toxic, or like intense friendships and relationships. Like, I wouldn't say the book is like capital Q queer, but there's definitely a vibe there, and it's about this girl who is in a Swiss boarding school in post-war Switzerland, and a new girl kind of arrives, and it's sort of about her and like how she kind of shakes the system of life that the narrator has. It's also kind of about growing up and like womanhood, and it's quite a cruel book, like in a way that feels like it's just part of this girl's life, but I thought it was really fantastically written, and yeah, it's definitely purple. Oh yeah, I should say, I'm sorry if like I say your name wrong, or if I say your like a name that isn't actually your name, like because people's like usernames now are like different to what they actually are called. That can be really hard for stuff like this, so I'm sorry about that. But next recommendation is for Renee who said Green and What We Feed the Manticore, and like contemporary and sapphic books. So I haven't read What We Fed to the Manticore. I mean, I hadn't read Idlewild either, but it's like short stories, environmental grief. It's narrated by animals, I think, from what I could tell. So for that, I guess I was imagining kind of like in terms of grief, so I thought Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin might be good, especially in terms of, I don't know, even though it's not about environmental grief, it's also sort of about environmental grief, because it's about a family who are displaced from Vietnam, I think, And yeah, there's a lot of grief, and like there's a lot of kind of travel and voyage, and there's like a homelessness to the book because yeah, of the experiences of the characters. It's mainly about the children in this family, and then you have like a couple different narrative points as well. I don't know if that would be interesting. I also thought that for a collection of short stories, I would recommend Salt Slow by Julia Armfield, because I definitely feel like that has some that really engage with ecological grief and change, and also there are some that are about like sort of the physicality of the human / animal body, and like I think there's one where like a girl turns into a praying mantis or something like that. So yeah, there's like a sort of playfulness around that too, and there's also space for some like grief and some kind of like post-apocalyptic-y kind of stuff too. Also there's like sapphic stuff in there. I do think that the short stories overall are a bit more blue than green, but that's okay. I feel like Fair Play by Tove Jansson could be a bit more of a greeny book rec too, but I don't know. There was just so many. I feel like I didn't do a very good job heeding to people's favourite colour, which is a shame because that's like what I really like about this. I think I'm just getting worried that people aren't going to like what I recommend, which will be fine. So it's fine. You know, it's all going to be fine. This doesn't really matter. It's just having a nice time. So, next recommendation is for Sophie, or Redhead Reading. And she says, let's go green. Recently loved The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. I have no idea what I'm looking for, something which has wonderful imagery. So I think the book I want to recommend, or one of them, is a book that has interesting imagery. I wouldn't say it's like wonderful in like a whimsical sense, but it is like, I thought it was very like vivid and intense in quite like a, I don't really want to say dark way, but just in like a, not in an especially positive, like optimistic way, like in quite like a, well, I can't think of the right word, so we're moving on. But that's The Wooden Doctor by Margiad Evans. I know that you do read quite a lot of Welsh fiction, so maybe you have read this already, but I hope that you haven't, and then you can. It basically follows the story of like a young woman growing up. It's a, I feel like it's a book of like 2 parts. It's quite a short book, and yeah, so it follows this girl, and she has like a really difficult and dysfunctional family. And I think she goes to a boarding school in France where she's like a student, and maybe also she teaches English to them as well, but I can't remember if that's true. It definitely has Villette energy. The thing that I remember as well is the way that it described like chronic pain and kind of like, just pain in general, I guess, and how it described the kind of like physical bodily like sensations of that, but even more than pain, it like pain that became like a being outside of yourself. I also thought you should try that new Beowulf like graphic novel / like picture book that has come out recently called Beowulf. I'll put a picture of it here. I can't remember who wrote it, just because like it looks sweet, and also Empress of Salt and Fortune is like, you know, oral storytelling. That's what like the series is kind of about. So then this is obviously like, I also really want to read this Beowulf book, to be honest, so that's maybe partially why I'm recommending it to you. I do think that Beowulf generally is quite green as well, I will say that. The Wooden Doctor, on the other hand, is kind of like purple. I don't know. I said in my notes about this, feral feminine loneliness energy, similar to Empress of Salt and Fortune. Very different though. Okay, the next person is Olivia, or Biblioghoul, which is obviously one of the like best usernames. So Biblioghoul's favourite colour is blue, and book enjoyed recently was Jawbone, and she said any rec. So a blue rec, I actually do think is blue, is Sanatorium by Abby Palmer, and I guess I'm kind of recommending this because it's like kind of experimental, and I don't know, I thought maybe it had some similar vibes to Jawbone, but I haven't read Jawbone, and it's not like a queer thriller or anything like that. But another reason I wanted to recommend it is because it is quite like about, well, it feels like there's quite a lot about like wateriness and liquidity, and I remember a reading vlog that you did, Olivia, where you read books about like the deep sea and stuff, and I feel like it maybe would like aligned to some degree. It's not about the sea, but it is about waters, and like I think it starts in a bath, and it's about like, and obviously sanatoriums are like inherently full of, because like most of the treatment, at least the treatment that we know of, like was to do with water, wasn't it? Like bathing and like heating people and cooling people, and then also treating them like shit. So yeah, it's about that. It's like kind of about like, I think the author has Emmy, and it's kind of about like treatments for that. I don't think this is like straightforwardly non-fiction though, so yeah. Okay, and then other recommendations I wanted to give you. I wanted to also recommend you 3 Days of Discipline by Fly Yeagy. And I also really, because to be honest, I was like desperately trying to figure out how I could fit this book in as a recommendation, because like I loved this book last year and I think more people should read it, and it's just like really fantastic. So I decided I'd recommend it to you, and I do think you'll like this. And I mean, yeah, let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm right too, but yeah. But that book is Insurrecto by Gina Apostol, which is just like a really fantastic novel about a film writer and translator, Mag Salin, who is Filipino, and she is brought into a film that the daughter of a famous filmmaker is trying to make. And the famous filmmaker, he made a film in the 70s, I want to say, about the Vietnam War, but he filmed it in the Philippines. And then sort of the translator's kind of idea is that like this film wasn't so much about the Vietnam War, although it maybe was about that too, but it was also about a specific massacre that happened in the Philippines in 1901, when Filipino revolutionaries attacked an American garrison, and then in retaliation American soldiers totally obliterated the countryside. So it's about like Filipino history, it's about American history, it's about imperialism, it's also about translation and filmmaking, and then also I would say like one of the core themes that run throughout it is grief. And I feel like the way that a novel is a box sometimes is really part of this, and it's so beautiful, and it feels so like I feel so grateful that I was able to like open this novel and read it and have it touch my heart. And yeah, it's just kind of absurdist too, like it's not, you know, and I also learned quite a lot about the Philippines I feel like I just didn't know about. So yeah, anyway, I would really recommend this. I hope you haven't read this, but although if you have read that, that's cool. I would really like to read more of Gina Apostol's work, so hopefully I'll do that this year, or maybe next year. This is like a recommendation for everybody watching this video too. You should all read this. I just almost cried, sorry. Alright, so a book recommendation for Charlie Brooke. Charlie Brooke reads, I think. Who says her favourite colour is sunflower yellow, which is a great choice. Recent read I loved it was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I love family narratives. When I was like thinking about this, I realised I feel like I haven't read a family narrative in a really long time, so I kind of struggled a little bit, but I came up with 2 options. Actually I came up with a bonus third option, but I don't think any of these totally fit into a sort of family narrative where you follow like generations of a family. But I do think that a lot of them circle around a family, or one of them, it's not familial, but I feel like it's maybe a grown-up version of Little Women to some degree. Not totally, but to some degree. That one, The Little Women, which maybe you've read, I hope not, is The Group by Mary McCarthy, which is a book from 1963, I think. And it's set in the 1930s in New York, and it follows 8 graduates from Vassar College as they just like live their life. And in a way, yeah, it's just kind of about growing up, but like not from a child into an adult, but from into a young adult into an adult, an older adult, I guess, but you know, also just like maturing. I feel like it may be in an interesting and developing way. It has some similar energy to Little Women. Is that crazy to say? I don't know. It's also about marriage, I guess, and like relationships and gender and sex and reproduction, children. They talk about communism in here, I think. They talk about abuse. They talk about mental illness. And then in some way they sort of don't talk in a very meaningful way about like queer relationships and like lesbianism. One book that I would say maybe would work for like family narrative, I would be hesitant to say for the colour yellow. Certainly not sunflower yellow, but I think I could see this as like a more browny yellow. But that's Confession with Blue Horses by Sophie Hardak, which is basically a novel about a woman who goes to Berlin, which is where she's from, to try to find out if she can find her brother, who was like taken away from them, like her family, when she was growing up in East Berlin in the 1980s. It does like the double timeline where you find out what's happening to her and her like current attempts to, and then you also simultaneously have the kind of unfolding of the story of her and her family and like how she even ended up not being in Berlin anymore. I really liked this book when I read it 2 years ago now, so I'd recommend that. And then I also thought, this is another one, I didn't mean for these to be like East German, but this is another one. This is like familial, it's very short, so it's not like a, you know, chronicle of a family, but it does show like a snippet into family relationships, specifically between siblings. Obviously it's called Siblings by Brigitte Raman. I didn't say that. And this version is translated by Lucy Jones. Yeah, so this is about 2 siblings. I mean, I guess it's actually about 3 siblings, but it focuses on 2 who are closer in age. Elizabeth and her brother Yuri, I want to say. And Elizabeth is a painter in East Germany, in the German Democratic Republic. Yeah, and her brother is called Uli. And basically, like, Uli wants to leave. And they have an older brother who defected already, called Conrad. And this is pre the wall being built, but it's very soon. I think the wall is very soon to be built. So yeah, it's just kind of about like the struggles, the care that they have for each other, the like misunderstandings. It's also about art and noticing, and I really loved this book. I would really recommend it. I'm not sure totally if it quite fits in with what you're looking for, but yeah. I think this probably is closer to sunflower yellow colour, but still not quite there. I would say this is the kind of yellow that like maybe would just leave you a bit blinded. So my wife Mari asked for a recommendation via recent faves, including Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid and Fair Play by Tove Jansson, and her favourite colour is green. 2 really fantastic books. So obviously Mari has great taste. I think I would recommend this book, Your Love Is Not Good by Joanna Hedver. I wrote like a list of things that were in Lucy and that were in Fair Play, and I actually sort of feel like if you put them together, at least those words, not necessarily the vibes of the books, you'd get this book. Because like we have love and art from Fair Play, we have anger and colonialism, and we also kind of have like love as well, so there's like, you know, a crossover, or like desire perhaps more from Lucy. And then if you put those all together, you kind of get this book, because this book is about an artist who gets obsessed with like a particular muse, and because of like the whiteness of her muse, basically like her work gets kind of picked up in a way that it hasn't before, and then she sort of has to reckon with that and reckon with the like racial politics of the art world, and she's sort of working through obsession, desire, love. She's also working through like her relationship with her mum, and like also art itself, and kind of like art as a mother. But I also thought that The Weather House by Nan Shepherd might be an interesting book to read, definitely a green book, because I also was thinking about like the homosociality in The Weather House and also in Fair Play, and I was wondering about like crossovers there, and like I think that would be interesting to read through. I did also try to come up with like a non-fiction book to recommend you, but I failed because I don't read that much non-fiction. But the Untrained Librarian says, green is my fave colour, lush green. I've been really craving women in history, queer history or art. I really loved your revolutionary feminist video, thank you. I'm hesitant to give a book because nothing has really jumped out at me recently. So obviously I decided not to recommend anything in the revolutionary feminist video, but like there's lots of recommendations there. Yeah, I guess I have like a couple to add. The only thing is, well, I have read one of these that I would recommend. I'm not sure totally if it would be super interesting, but I think that, to be honest, it kind of covers women in history, queer history and art all together. And then I have another book that I'm currently reading that I think would fit in, and I was like, oh, maybe I should have included it in that video, so I feel like it will fit the vibe. And then I also have another book recommendation / person to check out for stuff that you might be interested in. The book I have read is The Passion Projects: Modernist Women, Intimate Archives, Unfinished Lives by Melanie Mercier. And this book is about 4 modernist women who sort of embark on projects of biographizing other modernist women. And they do this in various different ways. There's like archival stuff, so in terms of like keeping like letters and kind of doing that organizational work. There's people who specifically try to write a biography of the woman. I think Gina Barnes does that about Elsa von Freytag Loringhoven, is that her name? I can't remember. And there's some other stuff too, which I can't remember anymore, but there's like Jane Heap and Margaret Anderson. There's a project that they were doing, one of them for the other, and I can't remember which way around that was. So it's a really interesting book, and it's a sort of form of like, I think I saw somebody review and call it like literary care work, and I really love that in the way that it like is a testament to the presence of women in history, in literary history in this case, but also like modernist history generally, like art history. So yeah, I think if you're looking for something, and in the sense that it also is trying to deconstruct this narrative that we have around the like great modernist man and like how literary movements are created, because one of the reasons why these women were embarking on such projects is because in real time they were watching their, you know, colleagues and their peers and the people that inspired and led them be written out of the record of sort of like who's important in modernism and in like literary history. Obviously those projects are pretty queer. I think all of the people I mentioned were queer. They might not all be queer, but I think they all are queer. So yeah. The book that I'm currently reading, but very slowly, but that I can tell is going to be great. Like, it's a really good book so far. I've read like the first, like the introduction, but it's good. And that's A Decolonial Feminism by Françoise Verger, which is translated by Ashley J. Bora. Yeah, and I'd really recommend this so far. I think it is like a pretty radical, like revolutionary feminist take, deconstructing capitalism, racism, colonialism and imperialism, and trying to kind of carve out and fight for a feminism that abolishes the many systems of oppression that we face, as opposed to kind of like placing a white woman on top of the chain of exploitation. And then a book I'd like to read, coupled with another person who I think you should check out, is Women Artists and the Surrealist Movement by Whitney Chadwick. Yeah, which was recommended by somebody I follow on TikTok, who, she does have a YouTube channel, but she doesn't really update it. She's much more active on TikTok. And that's Mary Rose, or Marginalient. So I'll leave a link to her in the description. But she does a lot of book reviews of, and she just talks in general too about art, but like she does book reviews and stuff of art and art history, and she has a great focus on feminist and women art history and queer stuff. So I'd really recommend checking out her TikTok. I'll try to maybe find the video where she talks about women artists and the surrealist movement, but I might struggle, so oh my gosh. Okay, we're going. Okay, so for Jennifer Loves Books, orange for favourite colour. Recent read that she loved was Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, and again, a free pass for any recommendations. I think this happened to me last year. I struggled with this, partially because books I kept thinking of recommending, I checked on Storygraph and Jennifer had already read them. But this is a book I would recommend, which was The Night Watch by Sarah Waters, because I feel like I haven't read Life After Life, but in terms of like doing my research for this, I think maybe it's like set in a similar-ish time frame, but also the way that it maybe like tells the story and plays around with the time of a story could be like interesting here, because this is told backwards. Anyway, it's a really great book about like a bunch of like sexual dissidents during the 1940s and like the Second World War. So yeah, it goes from 1947 to 41 and it tells the story backwards. But anyway, because you've already read that, I then was like, okay, Girl, Woman, Other might be an interesting one because it's like playing around with time, blah blah blah. We've also obviously read that. I mean, to be honest, most people have at this point. So yeah, I just really struggled. So I haven't read this book, but there's The End of Days by Jenny Erpenbeck, which does seem to be a little bit like Life After Life, but different, obviously. But it is like a time travel-y novel, I think. I'm not sure quite if there's time travel, but I know that it's set across, I think, the 20th century, and looks at like somebody's life. that is on my like to read list. I do have a copy, I just forgot to bring it over. Can you tell I'm like vaguely panicking? A book I have read that I thought maybe you would like is Confessions of the Fox by Geordie Rosenberg. I think this is like a book that you might like and you might just really not like, you know, like one of those Marmite books. So I think you should try it and see. But yeah, this is basically tells the story, it's again a double story of a academic who has found an old manuscript of well, it's about like the life of a thief, I think, in the 1700s, and that thief is trans, and it's about the academic reading the manuscript, also what happens to the academic. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, it's very queer, and it's like, does also play a bit around with time, both because of the 2 time zones, but also for another reason, which I can't tell you. I also then looked up like books that people would like link to like Life After Life. And I saw somebody recommend Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. Again, a book I have not read, but I do love Helen Oyeyemi, or at least I've loved the one book of hers I've read. Which again, I really want to read more of her, but yeah, apparently that's kind of like Life After Life, so maybe you should check that out. I'm sorry. Obviously that is like a major difficulty of like recommending books to people who read a lot, because like there's a high likelihood that they probably have read stuff. So for Sue Radiohead, my favourite forever colour is purple. A recent book I loved was Breeding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Yeah, I had no idea really what to recommend. I haven't read this, but I thought maybe you'd like it. And that's The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating, because it's like, again, nature writing, and it has a focus on attention and like, yeah. Seems good. Maybe somebody else can like in the comments, if you have a recommendation for Sue, like put them in the comments and we can crowdsource maybe. So for Sasquatch Blue, which is a great username, it says Dark Green, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, and How to Loiter in a Turf War by Coco Solid, and that gripping litfic from the 80s or earlier is what they are looking for. I basically have an author recommendation. I think that the person I've probably read the most from who was writing in the 80s is Sarah Schulman. I don't think that all of her work is gripping, definitely not, but I do think that some of them might work, especially. I think that the one that would maybe be the best is the Sophie Horowitz story, which was published in 1984, which is about feminist journalists trying to, you know, follow the exploits of a group of like radical feminist bank robbers. It's quite fun. I also think that Girls' Visions and Everything is a great one. I mean, it's not very gripping, certainly not a thriller, but it is more green, and this one was from 1986. And another one that's not from 80s, it's from 1992, is Empathy, which again maybe isn't gripping, but is quite an interesting like book, I think. I also thought perhaps Sula by Toni Morrison would be like an interesting book to check out. Again, I don't know if it would be described as gripping. I don't think I really read books that are gripping, at least not in like a thrilling sense, but I think obviously sometimes books like enthrall you for various different reasons, and I think Sula is a very kind of, I mean, it's a book that stays with you. I mean, I read it many years ago, but I feel like it's with me and it's very present in a way that like is very interesting to me, I guess. And I also thought Muriel Sparks' The Driver's Seat would be, this one I would say is maybe more on the like thriller gripping side. There is definitely a content warning for sexual violence. But yeah, that's about a woman who, it's from 1970, did I say that? And it's about a woman who goes on holiday. It's a very short novel, and she like is just like a normal woman and she's just having a time. Or is she? Alright, we're still going, but we're getting there. Okay, so for Elle Little, purple for favourite colour. I recently enjoyed Northwood by Marisa Mayer. Looking for Daiki classics or anything dark, unconscious, taboo. So immediately for like Daiki classics and purple, I thought The Gilda Stories by Joel Gomez, which is a little bit dark. It's about vampires, and there's blood in it. And yeah, I think, you know, it's not like super dark, but it's about lesbian vampires, so there is definitely a kind of taboo sense there, and obviously stuff about blood does tend to be quite taboo, at least maybe not so much now, but just like in the sense of how, I don't know, I guess it just like speaks to a kind of squeamishness socially in terms of like how we think about blood, and then also how we think about like the physical relationships we have with each other and like our interconnection or like lack of interconnection. Anyway, but I love this book. It's really good. I would really recommend it. It follows one particular vampire called Gilda, as she lives her life through the various ages, and it kind of visits her at like various stages. So, you know, we start when, I think in 1850s Louisiana, where she is running away from slavery, and then we follow her into like the 1970s, maybe 1990s, I'm not sure, and then we end in like the 2020s, I want to say, maybe 2050, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a little bit in the future. Yeah, it's lovely, and it's about relationships and care, and it is also about like the sort of ongoing legacy of slavery and responses to that. All that being said, I'd really recommend that. And then I also thought, for a book that does go for like dark unconscious taboo, which I don't think is a particular kind of theme or atmosphere or like set of concepts that I especially look forward to reading, but obviously I do think that Nightwood by Juno Barnes probably does fit that. It also does fit like Dykey Classic, because this is queer with this fantastic cover. This is kind of an unbearable book. This is not really a recommendation, it's kind of an anti-recommendation, but at the same time, like, I had to recommend it because it does seem to kind of fit with what you're asking for. Yeah, again, this is quite like short story-ish. I mean, I hesitant to say, I don't really like it when people say that it's just a bunch of connected short stories unless the author has decided to describe it that way. Maybe that's silly of me. I do believe in death of the author, but in that respect, sometimes I'm like, but this needs to be a novel because it's making a critique about the structure of the novel. You see what I mean? But anyway, either way, this is, yeah, it's sort of about, it's set in like interwar France, about the life of Americans and Europeans in Paris in the 1920s. And it's a little bit around a circus, especially at the beginning. Yeah, this is a very interesting and tortured book, and it was written by Juna, like, I think after she broke up with her long-term partner Thelma Wood, and it was like kind of a nightmare. And Juna, I think, probably always had like a lot of difficulties in her life, and I feel like you can really tell from reading this. It's very, yeah, sort of desperate and like distorting and difficult. There's another D word. But yeah, one of the key relationships in it is between Robin Vote and Nora Flood. They have like a morbid lesbian relationship, and it's bad, but it's also kind of good, you know what I mean? I feel like every time I talk about that book, I'm like, oh, I'll just mention it really briefly, and then I just talk for ages, even though, like, I wouldn't say, I feel like at points I kind of hated reading it, but at the same time, like, I wanted to read it. So Elle, D-E-Q, Elle Deck, I'm not sure if that's your actual name or anything at all, sorry, says Blue, Naomi Klein's doppelganger. Specifics would be making sense of these confusing times, which I think is maybe a lot to ask for a book, but I understand what you need. I went for Communism for Kids by Binny Adamczak, translated by Jacob Blumenfeld and Sophie Lewis, which is a little dinky book about communism and it explains how did capitalism arise. It's got cute drawings. What is communism? What is the market? What is crisis? What is to be done? And then it goes through some various things that we can do, slash like the implications of some things that people are doing. And then it has like an epilogue called Communist Desire, which I actually don't think is especially like comforting, but I think the rest of the book is, and the drawings are, I think, pretty cute. They're all black and white, but they're just like these. So yeah, I'd recommend that. I also think Interviews with Radical Palestinian Women, edited by Shoal Collective, is a great book, and I found it really, whilst it like very you know, it doesn't shy away from talking about the difficult experiences of Palestinian women, the way that it shows and allows an insight into these like amazing women who articulate themselves, and particularly articulate like a world vision of care and justice and liberation and fighting against occupation, both in a local but also in a global sense, is really beautiful, and I found it very, very sort of helpful, but also just like very informational, and yeah, I'd really recommend it. I also kind of want to rec Free by Leah Uppy, because although I don't think it's quite like Naomi Klein's doppelganger, I did feel like maybe one of the reasons why people like that book is because Naomi Klein seems kind of nice in it from the way people are talking about it, and I felt like Leah Uppy wrote about coming of age in Soviet Albania, which is what it's about, where she's from, and also like specifically at the kind of like fall and like crossover point from communism. But I felt like her personality shone through it a lot, and I really liked her voice and like her as a person. I think she's really cool. She seemed great from the book, which obviously I understand as a memoir she's like representing herself on purpose, but yeah, I really liked it, so I'd recommend that. None of those are blue, and I'm sorry about it. So Anna said Purple and I loved Your Wish Is My Command by Dina Mohammed, which is a graphic novel which I think is also called Schubeck Lubeck. And I do have to say that I think that purple is probably one of the most common ones this year, and also green was again very common, but that happened the like other year that I did colours too. I was expecting a lot of green. I really want to read Your Wish Is My Command. It seems really lovely and everybody's like talking about it and it being great. I think it's translated from the Arabic, and it's about a alternative modern day Egypt where wishes like are a real thing, like a real commodity that you can get. I thought that maybe Squire by Nadia Shamas and Sarah Alfaghi would be like a nice kind of complement to Your Wish Is My Command, because they're both graphic novels. They both are kind of like fantasy graphic novels, and they both deal with like social relationships, I guess. I mean, I guess you could say that about like anything, but I don't know. I obviously haven't read Your Wish Is My Command, but Squire is about this girl, and it is also about wishes in a sense. It's kind of about like realizing that maybe if you get what you wish for, you don't, it was a mistake because you've bought into the ideology. But yeah, Squire is basically about colonialism, and it's about this girl who really wants to become a knight, and she has to go to like squire training, but she's from a group of people that if they find out she's from them, they'll, you know, treat her badly because they don't trust people like her. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that at least one of the creators is Palestinian American, and you could definitely sort of see like the overlaps in terms of like how Palestinians are treated, but also just in general like colonized people. I think it's dedicated to, or there's definitely like a mention of Edward Said right at the beginning of the book, which is like lovely. So yeah, I'd recommend that. And for another kind of like alternative African set book, this isn't like contemporary, you know, but I did want to recommend Everfair by Nisi Shaw, which is set in like an alternative day Congo, or one of the places it's set is alternative day Congo. No, alternative past Congo, sorry. And yeah, it follows like a lot of characters, some of whom are like Fabian socialists, and it's set in like the 1890s probably, at least to begin with. Also like the like native population of Congo, including various like royalty, and yeah, just like some really cool people, and it's like a lot of fun, and it's queer, and it's just like it's you know, it can be really fun and really nourishing to like do this kind of imagining, because yeah, it's sort of about fighting against also Belgian colonization of Congo that did happen, but yeah, kind of imagining what could have happened if some steampunk technology and also some like other stuff had happened differently, I guess. I've been filming for so long, I feel like you can really tell that I just get more and more tired as I go on. Last person, Aziza Bayomi. Again, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Pink for colour, which is the right answer, best choice. Nobody else gets major points for this, but pink is the best colour. A book I loved was Willful Disregard by Lena Anderson. I'm trying to read more books from the 19th century, but not so picky. Funny thing is, Willful Disregard is a Swedish novel, and I looked up the novel and it's translated by Sarah Death. And you know, I've read a book translated by Sarah Death. It's this one. So I thought I would recommend this one because this is Money by Victoria Benedictsson, translated from the Swedish. It was published in 1885, so it fits your 19th century reading wishes. And it's a really great book about a girl called Selma, I think, right? Yeah, Selma Berg, who just kind of like grows up and like she gets married, I guess, and like, you know, it's just it's like a short snippet into her life, and we get kind of instances, moments that are meaningful. It's about the difficulty of being a woman. It's about marriage as a contract, and kind of like marriage as a, like, how bad marriage is. It's like a critique of a marriage novel, like one of those kind of classic ones. On the back, you know, it like references Madame Bovary and Ibsen's Nora, like from A Doll's House, which is like fair enough, but I also feel like, you know, this is from a woman who got married and who experienced it, and I think we should just always be comparing it to what these men imagine it's like, you know, especially Madame Bovary. That novel is so misogynistic. But yeah, I'd really recommend this, and I also wanted to just recommend Middlemarch by George Eliot as like a great novel to read from the 19th century. Because it's great. I mean, it is big, so I understand if you're put off by that, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth it. It's like a really just wonderful novel. Okay, finally, we're done. Thank you so much for bearing with me. If you have, let me know what you think of my recommendations, or if you if you have any thoughts about them already, like you've already read them or whatever. Yeah, I hope you're having a great day when you're seeing this, or as good a day as possible that you can have in the world that we live in, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye.